You're a Jets guy. Jets need a receiver or an offensive line. So you have to similar to the tackles, right? We have, I think, 3 consensus guys in the top that will go first: Henry Ruggs, CeeDee Lamb, Jerry Jeudy. You have Ruggs, Lamb, and Jeudy ranked in that order. What is it with Henry Ruggs that stands out the most that you make him the best receiver in this class?
Love him as a football player. It's almost hard to explain. I mean, first of all, he's 4.28 40 speed. So, I mean, it's like mind-blowing speed. And we're not talking about a guy from a school that wasn't all that productive, that he just was a good combine burner and he looks good working out. We're talking about a dude who we watched play in the biggest games. He loves contested catches too. He loves going up and fighting for the ball. He loves to block. He is absolutely insane. He has all these weird plays on tape, like after interceptions and turnovers, where he's hustling back to make defensive plays. He plays on special teams, and he's just a huge home run threat. So my comp for him is kind of Tyreek Hill. I'm not sure that he's ever going to be like a traditional number one wide receiver, Henry Ruggs. But like, if you could get a Tyreek Hill type of talent on your team, then, at least the way I think about football, you pull the trigger and you do that, and you don't worry about other – like CeeDee Lamb, I think, is also going to be an absolute superstar. Jerry Jeudy is when we start getting into, like, fit being more important. I think he's a Calvin Ridley type of player. He comes out of the same tradition at that position at Alabama, and I think Ridley had the advantage of landing with a team with a real number one receiver opposite him and could kind of just, like, fit into a role – and not have a ton of attention right away. Whereas if Jeudy comes to a place like the Jets and he's really the only option on the offense, he goes from being a part of maybe the best receiving core in the history of college football to being on a terrible offense where all the attention's on him. That's where we start being like, I don't know. I haven't seen it. I can't tell you confidently that he's going to be a star anyway. And then the drop off there's levels, but I mean, man, this class is so deep because then you got Justin Jefferson, who I love. Complicated player because he moved inside to the slot to explode with Joe Burrow and Joe Brady. So there's a bunch of changes from 2 years ago to this past season that it's hard to tell how much of them are his development, but he's a great player. T. Higgins is a player that I personally love at Clemson and gave a first round grade. Then everyone's been talking about Denzel Mims. Jalen Reagor from TCU is another personal favorite of mine. All the way back, I mean, I know you know all about KJ Hamler. I have KJ Hamler as my number 10 wide receiver in this class. So I think if you know anything about KJ Hamler, that
love
says a
KJ.
lot about how
exactly.
That says a lot about how deep this class is because that guy could end up being a star. He really could. So I think the drop off for me with the whole class starts happening a couple guys later in the 16, 17, 18 range. But this class is legitimately like 18 players deep of top 3 round talents. And it's going to be fascinating to see how many go in round 1, who picks the first one, how many go in round 1, and then how many end up getting taken in the first 3 rounds.
Think about it. You said almost 18 guys that like top 3 that could be real stars and real contributors. It's the depth of wide receiver is something like we may never see again in terms of any position depth to have that much stardom so deep in the draft. Tom, I think by far the biggest scouting report I read on tdscouting.com that stood out to me was yours on Justin Herbert. Because I feel like Herbert's an interesting guy. I personally feel like more teams like Herbert than actually like fans, and especially on Twitter. I feel like there's no one that really likes Justin Herbert a lot on Twitter.
Yeah.
And your comparisons blew my mind. So you compared him to the likes of Mitchell Trubisky, Blake Bortles, Josh Allen, and Carson Wentz. Obviously, 4 way different levels of bust to 6. I mean, you almost had MVP with Carson Wentz if he didn't get hurt. So there's so much, in between there with his ceiling and where he could go. Why is it with him that there's so much variance on his potential and like really how far he could actually grow as a quarterback?
So when I talked before about dime level throws on film, he actually had the fewest of the top 7. So he has an explosive arm. He's 6'6". He's a fluid athlete. He can even run all over the place. He's got all the tools. We just have not seen him put them all together yet. And the reason why that's an actual concern is because he went back for his senior year. He started 4 years at Oregon. I mean, so when you got a guy at a program like that, especially that ends with Pac-12 championship success and Rose Bowl success. And remember, he played for 3 different head coaches at Oregon. He was at Oregon at a really turbulent, terrible time for the program. And it ends on this huge high, but it's not because he put it all together as a passer, not at all. If you remember the big key of the Pac-12 championship game and then the Rose Bowl, it's Justin Herbert running all over the place, which is why Bortles comp sneaks in there. I think he's a better player than Bortles, but it's just the same thing of like, if you need in the highest pressure moments to default, especially after 4 years at a program, to default back to run first, that's not an NFL quarterback trait. So he has a lot of development left, even though he has a lot of experience, and that's what's concerning to me. And then there's just a lack of anticipation. He didn't really play. It's like the opposite of Joe Burrow's offense. He didn't really play in an offense that forced him to make a lot of full field reads and attack downfield off of those reads with any kind of anticipation. So again, there's a lot of new that has to be taught to this dude, a lot of adjustments to the NFL style of quarterbacking. And, it's a tough call for a team like the Chargers at 6 and the Dolphins at 5, because I don't think the upside ultimately, if everything comes together, is probably higher than Tua. But the reasonable upside, what we can reasonably expect based on what we've seen already, is that Tua has a higher upside, but it's just injury riskier. So you're going to pick that, or you're going to pick the safer guy, which Herbert is safer, but you got a lot of work to do. You got a lot more work to do.
Yeah, to have the risk of drafting the next Mitchell Trubisky or Blake Bortles can make, especially Charger fans, the 3 of them out there roll in their graves for sure. That's a tough one. We have 2 more here quickly here, Tom. You have Jordan Love going 20 to the Jaguars. Is he a lock first-round pick at this point?
I'm not sure. I didn't put a first-round grade on him. And so the guy I hemmed and hawed on last year on the borderline of the first-round grade was Daniel Jones. I didn't give him a first-round grade either, and then, of course,
interesting.
6 overall.
Okay.
So I think he's one of those guys. If somebody's in love, he could go in the top 10, no pun intended. Or it wouldn't be absolutely crazy if he fell out of the first round. Just here's the reason why. It's because he needs time. So there's so much potential there, but he needs even more time than Herbert. He probably needs the Mahomes treatment of at least 1 full year of not touching the field. So he fits in places like New Orleans, maybe, or places where he'll actually have that kind of time. But I think those situations are limited, and especially in the first round, you're trying to take a guy, a lot of cases, if you're a bad team without a quarterback, who's going to play sooner rather than later. And I think that might be the thing that drops him out of the first round. But I fully expect him to go. I just had a hard time. I ended up chucking him to the Jags in my mock. Mm-hmm. I don't really believe late in the first round. I don't know where the spot is. I put him 20th to the Jags with their second pick. I don't know where the spot exactly is for him to go in the first round.
Yeah, he's definitely a wild card for sure. Like you said, just you see almost so much, sort of like with Herbert, so much variance where you could go, a 3rd round, 1st round. Even you hear scouts talking about they gave him a 3rd round grade, or they were very scared. Like I say, he's just one of those polarizing prospects that there's so much good, but also so much question marks as well. We'll finish off with this, Tom. Especially now, like we said, there's so, especially with nothing going on, there's so much focus and intensity with the draft. Is there a player that you're sleeping on that you see a lot of draft analysts and teams not really talking about, or even vice versa? Maybe there's a player that everyone is sold on, everyone's raving about, that you just see it and say, I'm not sold on that guy.
I love Marlon Davidson from
Auburn.
Okay. I think he's a first-round player, and he's going to be such a good pro. It's not that he's just not a very buzzy guy, and there's a lot of mocks that leave him out of the first round. I'm not quite as high as on CJ Henderson from Florida, and I'm a Gator fan as everybody else. And I think he might sneak into the top 10 picks. He might be the Jaguars' pick at number 9. I just think there's consistency and effort and heart issues, and it's harsh to say because I actually like the guy, but I did not watch him this season at Florida and think he was going to end up being a top 10 pick. First rounder, sure, but not top 10. And then let me see if there's one more I can give you real quickly. I mean, it's just fascinating. The wide receivers, I love Jalen Reagor, but it's fascinating which of those fringe end of first round, early second round guys are going to be favored. We haven't talked about guys like Michael Pittman. There are just so many. I really like Michael Pittman, but Jalen Reagor I think is my favorite one of the late first round, early second round guys out of TCU. What an unbelievably exciting player to watch on tape.